Hi, Kingsley here. Today, we're doing part one of a two-part series on how to maintain your identity and practice self-care for a happier marriage with a very special guest who I'll introduce in a few moments. If this is the first time you're hearing me and is wondering, who am I to be speaking on topics like this? Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Kingsley Grant, a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified relationship coach, having counseled and coached hundreds of couples over the last several years, and having been married for almost 4 decades. I'm able to talk about topics like this one with great confidence, as you can just imagine. Now, let me also recommend that you listen to my podcast at happiermarriagesecrets.com/podcast and or read my blogs at happiermarriagesecrets.com/blog to hear more about my thoughts on topics similar to this one that you're going to be listening to today. Now, at the end of this video, I'll share with you how to get a free ebook on the topic of 5 secrets to your happier marriage, the marriage you always wanted and so deserve. Okay, that will be given to you at the end of this video. So make sure you watch all the way through and get that gift that I have for you. Now, before I introduce our guest, make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit the like button, and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any of the videos that's posted on this channel, right? I don't want you to miss that. And if you want to hit that, view the shorts that is on this channel, hey, you can get some brief capturing of other topics that I've done on the YouTube shorts. So make sure you also watch that as well. Now, today we're talking with Georgia Bryce as our guest today, Georgia Bryce Hutchison. And we're speaking to her about how to maintain your identity and practice self-care for a happier marriage. But let me tell you a little about our guest, and then we'll dive into the interview. Georgia is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she has dedicated herself to helping families and individual members identify and work through underlying factors fueling problems in their relationships and their lives. She helps them improve their skills at effective conflict management and communication and cultivate healthy coping skills. So with that said, without further ado, would you help me introduce our guest today, Mrs. Georgia Bryce Hutchison? Georgia, how are you doing today?
Listen, it is Saturday. It is bright and sunny where I'm at, and I'm loving it.
I'm sure people who are in the cold area are going to hate you now for saying what you just said.
I'm so sorry.
I know, hey, well, they can come on down and we have room for more. So that's good. So today we're going to actually talk about couples and in marriages and how people can have a happier marriage. What I find is that almost everyone who enters in marriage space, they have in their mind certain ideas of what should happen, certain expectations. And sometimes those doesn't happen the way they were thinking, right? And so the marriage start changing and things are fading and then becoming unhappy. So I know as a marriage and family therapist, which you are working with so many couples, what have been your experiences in that setting? And what normally does a couple or a spouse who shows up, what's their starting place when they show up to see you as a counselor?
Ooh, loaded question. And you are absolutely right. I think one of the biggest challenges couples do have, the ones I've actually worked with, it's having these ideals that we enter marriage with. There's this expectation, which is understandable because we all come from our own unique culture, our own family culture, where maybe some of us grew up with our parents and we observed the relationship dynamic between our parents. So you kind of come into your own marriage expecting some of these same things, if not everything, to play out the same way. So I think this idea of what marriage is and what it should look like, my expectations concerning my partner, having those preconceived notions and then getting into the situation and realizing that I can't bend my partner to do and to get him or her to do what I want him or her to do. And it's just not evolving or unfolding the way I thought it would have. Right. So I think that's pretty much one of the biggest challenges I find couples coming in with. Couples will come in and they'll give you like a problem list. But when you break it down to the very basics, oftentimes that's most of the time the starting point where I have to go at is where I kind of take some time to help them explore their own life history, right? So we talk a little bit about what their relationship was like growing up with their parents or parent, and what were some of the observations they made in terms of the relationship dynamic between the parents, because then, or the absence thereof, because that's when you start beginning to connect the dots. And I think a lot of times couples come in not realizing how much their historical context is driving those expectations and those things that are playing out in the current relationship with their partners.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I know I grew up, my dad and my mom was married until my dad died first, and then my mom died many, many years later. And what I saw in that relationship, number one, I made this statement many times. I didn't see what I was hoping to see. I didn't see a marriage where there was a lot of affection and any kind of encouragement, or, you know, and what our experience is, right? So that was not the model, unfortunately. And it's not to throw my parents under the bus, but it's not the model that I really wanted to have, because I'm thinking that, wow, I don't see my dad and my mom interacting in a way that was loving. And you know, I see he was very stern, very strong, this, you know, Jamaican culture type of thing. And so I came in with this whole male dominance was really the cultural setup, right? So I came in, and the idea is that the man should be the head of the home, and he should, you know, that's the expectations, right? Now, there, of course, thank God that has been, you know, been changed, but that is where I find some couples, like you described earlier, they come in with this preconceived ideas of what it should look like, the roles that should be played. And now they're like, surprise, it's not the way. And now it's almost like, wait a minute, I guess you don't care, you don't love. And all these different kind of scripts is now being thrown into the mix, and they're having this problem. So they come in with this list, and now they're having this expectation shattered, disappointment, hurts, and pain, and so on. How do you then, where do you begin to help them to realize what might be most helpful to start to change the experiences they're having?
Yeah. So I think, you know, as I mentioned just now, this idea of helping them kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into their own historical context. And as I'm talking about that, I'm thinking about one of my most recent couple that I dealt with. They're both young, they've been married for a couple of years. And interesting mix, you know, the one of the dyad, one of the individuals in the dyad grew up in a home where grew up with both parents. However, it was the same kind of dynamic. There wasn't that emotional affection that was readily present. There was that disconnect. Mom was always busy working, dad was just kind of hands off. And so there wasn't that much, a lot of exchange wasn't occurring in the relationship. So not feeling, knowing that you're loved, because of course, as long as I'm feeding you and I'm taking care of you, I'm putting clothes on your back and you have a roof on your head, then you are loved.
Of course.
In terms of conversations, in terms of intimacy, all of that stuff was absent. So that was one issue that played out on that person's end. So when this individual got into the marriage, didn't know how to show up. And of course, the other partner is having expectations of these things, and they're not playing up. The other partner, on the other hand, grew up in a single parent home, right? And so the only kind of, when even within the context of conflict management, the only kind of relationship exchange is between an adult and a child. And so that authoritative presence was always playing out, that dominance was always there. So of course, this individual shows up in marriage, and that's exactly what this person was doing with regards to the partner. And so there was that constant gridlock over issues that were very, very simple that they were not able to communicate. There was very limited conflict management because, again, the historical context, it was just consistently driving how each person was showing up. Some of it they were aware of, some of it they came to understand when we started doing that deep dive into the life stories or their life histories. And so I think as they began making those connections, connecting the dots, it's almost like a eureka moment occurred for both of them. And they're like, oh my God, this is why I'm showing up the way I'm showing up, or this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And once each person started recognizing that it is my historical context that's having significant influence on how I'm showing up in this space, I can now get to choose, how do I really want to show up? I can get to reframe how I want my marriage to be. And so the awareness came in, and now we are starting to work on what is your ideal? What is the kind of culture that you want for your marriage, separate and distinct from what you're coming out of? So I think once the awareness is present, because of course, Mr. Kingsley, you and I know, if you don't even know that that stuff is at work, you don't even know what to do. Right. So we spend time kind of unlocking those kinds of dynamics, and people become aware of them, and then they get to choose, okay, this is not working for me. These are some things I've adopted from where I'm coming from. It's not fitting into this environment that I'm in. So what is it that I need from my partner? What does my partner need from me? And how can we show up together, creating something new and something different? So that's one aspect that I do work on. One of the other things that I do as well is I typically reserve this for my individual therapy sessions, but I'm realizing I gotta bring it into couples. I have to talk a lot about core beliefs, those deep beliefs that drive us, that we hold about ourselves. And these are often, we have good and negative, but the negative core beliefs, as you know, put a significant cap on how far we can go. And if I don't feel good about myself, then obviously that's gonna show up in the relationship, right? And then cognitive distortions, which I like to call them, that's the elephant sitting in the room. And oftentimes one of those primary things that's creating gridlock in relationships, and we don't know that they're there. Because poll any of your clients, you ask them, have you ever heard the concept of cognitive distortions? And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. So by way of explaining that briefly for your audience, it's a distorted way of thinking. It's things that we perceive to be there, when in truth and in fact, they're not. So I'll give you a perfect example. It's overgeneralizing. So one thing happens with one person, and so we just kind of lump sum that this is always going to play out, or because this incident occurred in this setting, I'm always going to be subjected to this thing playing out constantly. Jump into conclusion. We don't assess the facts, but we jump to conclusion. Why? Because we had an experience before, and we automatically think that this is the next thing that's going to play out. And so we already gear up ourselves to deal with those issues. And in truth and in fact, it's not the situation that's playing out. So I think when my clients become aware of these nuances that are at work, again, it's almost like a light bulb goes off, and then they get to then decide, how do I want to respond in these situations when they show up? Is this really what's happening here? Or is it something completely different?
So, which I think is very cool. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think what it is now that you kind of help them to unpack and identify some of these things, which tells me then they have to then change basically now how they communicate, right? How do they get right? So this is a big, most of my clients when they show up, they will, most times they'll say 90% of the time, they'll say, we just don't communicate. We just don't communicate. Our communication is horrible. And that's, they start there as an entry point, but then of course there's other issues that's parlayed onto that. But here's my question to you, Georgia, is how important then is them to change their communication style, and or how do they do that? Or how important is that, especially after they've identified some of these core underlying beliefs and so on?
I think ultimately the idea of identifying those things is then going to enable you to be able to change your communication style. No, it's kind of tricky when you talk about communication styles, because there are different kinds, different ways in which people communicate. That's subjective. I am an extrovert, for example, and a lot of times you find in partnerships where one is more extroverted and really need to talk about issues right now, really need to get this thing solved, and the other person is more on the, well, give me some time, I gotta think about this before I say anything. There's nothing wrong with either approach, right? I think the most important thing is, number one, recognizing that there is a difference in how people communicate, and there's a difference in the ways in which people seek to resolve conflict or manage conflict. And there's no right or wrong to it. I think, however, when we talk about those things that I referenced earlier, the idea of the cognitive distortions that could be at work, or those historical things that are surfacing and influencing how I'm showing up in a relationship, if they're able to identify those pieces and how it could be taking away from communication, or how it could be creating gridlock. Because of course, you think about a lot of times when people talk about we don't communicate well, or there's a lot of conflict in a relationship, it really comes down to people not being able to manage the anxiety that's associated with the moment, right? And so if I'm the person who, I love to just resolve issues right away, and nothing is wrong with that, and my partner is the one who says I need time to really process and think about it, it's managing the anxiety. It's managing the anxiety piece. So if I can manage my anxiety about feeling the need to fix this thing right now, and being patient enough to wait until my partner comes on board to say, okay, I'm ready to have a conversation, then that's a win. And of course, just because the other person who likes to lay off, it's also anxiety that that person is seeking to manage.
Right.
You know, in your way of trying to avoid conflict, but we
Yeah.
already know avoidance of conflict just creates more conflict. So both people are managing anxiety in different ways. Both people are communicating in different ways. But if we're able to help individuals identify those nuances that makes it difficult to communicate clearly, even though our communication styles might be different, or to manage conflict effectively, even though our approach to conflict management might be different, if we're able to help them identify those other things that are making it hard, and then help them put measures in place to address those issues, then communication is not a problem.
Yeah. You know, I really like what you
like communication in and of itself is not the problem.
Right. It's like, yeah, I think it's just one of the things that how it shows up, right? And then it shows up in the way that, we don't don't, our interactions become very, maybe hostile or whatever it comes as comes as a result of that. And many times, as you described, so wow, those differences shows up. And so what I find sometimes in those differences and not realizing that we're just different in our styles and being okay with that, or anxiety is driving parts of that.
Yes.
I find the couples then creates other additional problems, because now they begin to, the anxiety drives certain behaviors, right? And it creates some conflict areas. So I call it disruptive interactions, because now, because they didn't understand, they didn't know this, it disrupts the whole dynamic of the relationship. So when they are in that, I call it disruptive cycle, because of not knowing certain things, not being able to be okay with the differences, how do they then change that? And what might be some steps or some things that will be helpful for a couple or a person listening right now who is in that chaos, that mayhem, because they have really not understood the difference or be okay with that. And these behaviors that have come out as a result of that have caused pain and hurt and all those different things. What would they need to do from this point to change all of that to set up for possibly a more healthy and a happier relationship?
I think it's important to first of all understand that it's not so a lot of the conflict or a lot of the gridlock comes because we're feeling that our partner is after us. Either they're coming after us or they're trying to marginalize us, or a number of different things. It's him or her against me. One thing they taught us in therapy when I was in school is that the problem is the problem. Your partner is not the problem.
Right.
And so I think and I could say it because when I also think about my own personal life, because, people seem to think therapists don't have issues. We got issues too.
Let's spend a day together and I can bring some my world.
Okay. But I do realize that when I'm working with couples and when I'm able to help them come to a state or a space where they realize that what their partner is doing, it really most of the time isn't about them. It's about the partner. It's about the individual's own intrapersonal struggles, whether it's their own cognitive distortions that they're dealing with, or their own negative core beliefs about themselves, or their own historical context and trauma and experiences that they're battling, and they're reacting to it. When we're able to help them come to that point of understanding, it helps to alleviate some of the pressure. Because now I'm beginning to realize that when my partner is not really coming after me, they're reacting to me, but what's going on has very little to do with me. It's something that's going on with the individual themselves. And so that kind of eases a lot of the tension out of the room, so that now we can actually sit and perhaps even become more empathic towards the other person. Because now I'm seeing it's not that the person is coming after me. They're just reacting because 9 times out of 10, they don't even realize that they're struggling. The stuff that they're struggling is with themselves. It's something that's going on with themselves. And so it's easier when that's cleared to have people sit together and have conversations. And people then become curious, like, oh, wow, I didn't even know this about you. I didn't understand that you were going through this and that's what it meant to you. All along, I was here taking it personal, that it was an assault or an affront against myself, when in truth and in fact, it had nothing to do with me. So getting them to that place where there is a sense of relief, if you want to put it that way, then we can have real dialogue and then determine what do we want to do next in terms of the relationship.
I love that. I love the way that you framed that, because I think it just leads right into my next part, because I think that, yes, that this empathy and this understanding and realizing that your spouse, your partner, your husband, your wife is the one who is really probably dealing with some issues on his or her, in his or her own world, in her own, space. So that recognition and that empathy lens that is now being brought into the conversation here will allow the person possibly then to see that, like you just said, that what happened and what he or she may have done may not necessarily be against them or towards them, right? It's their own issues. So I find, though, a lot of painful moments may have occurred unnecessarily, or misunderstandings have taken place, have led to pain, and as a result of that. So a person listening right now who find themselves is now saying, oh man, maybe, yes, my husband, maybe my wife is really, I see the struggle sometimes, the stress they're under, and I see it's those times that they are behaving this way. So there's hurt. How does a person then take that and decide, well, we need to move past this or move to a healthier place? But there's hurt, there's pain, there's still something that have happened. What might be the next thing they need to do then to begin to start healing, or even to push this relationship to what I call a happier state? That's the question. And in part 2, Georgia will give you her take, which will surprise you. It did me. And I won't say anymore. I won't let the cat out the bag. You got to watch part 2 to hear what it is she said in her answer to that question that you've just heard me asking. So thanks for listening and watching. And before I tell you how to get your free ebook, let me remind you to make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit the like button, and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any of the videos posted on this channel. And remember to listen to the Happier Marriage podcast, and the links will all be provided below, so you will have free access to that, and you'll know how to get there by clicking those links that will be in the right below inside this episode, this channel. So again, here's that free gift. It's an ebook, and the ebook is, I mentioned earlier, you can go to kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. And again, the links are all provided right below. So you don't have to worry about writing them down. Just go there, click on that, and boom, you get all your gift and have access to all that I mentioned in this video on this channel. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch and being here with me. So with that said, my friend, peace out, God bless, and I'll see you on the next part 2 of this episode.